Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tony Carenzo here with Italian Dual Citizenship Assistance. Today, we're going to take an updated look at the proposed Italian bill DDL 1450 and some of the potential windows of opportunity that this bill could create. And just a quick reminder to like and subscribe and keep this valuable information coming your way. Now, if you're blocked by the minor issue currently, you will want to check this out. And most of us are familiar with the March 28th decree, but very few people are familiar with DDL 1450, which is a proposed law that could significantly change how Italian citizenship by descent is recognized. In fact, it has the potential to be much more impactful than the March decree, as it seems to be the intention for the long-term laws put into place, whereas the decree itself was designed as an emergency stopgap measure. And just a disclaimer, as always, I am not an attorney. I'm not an Italian attorney, and I can't give you legal advice. This is the best attempt at deciphering this 75 pages of legal text at this point with what we know as of April 20th of 2025. This is a fluid situation. Things are likely to change, and the information will be updated and added to as new information and updates come in. And I really want to bring everybody this information and keep the information flowing. A lot of people have been reaching out and expressing a lot of frustration with their service providers and just the lack of information that is flowing right now. So I'd like to get this information out there. This is intended to be a conversation starter. This is not meant for anybody to take as gospel or final word. This will all be, I'm sure, changing as this law goes through the process of being converted into law formally, and new interpretations and more information will come out. As of right now, there's not much out there. So I wanted to get this out there so people can have the information, even if it's early on, and start to think about what might be coming and start to make some plans. So let's do our best to understand DDL 1450 as of today. Now, DDL 1450 isn't law yet, but it could be soon. But things could change during the process of this bill moving from its initial proposal into law, and the proposal may replace the emergency rules under Decree 36 with a more structured and permanent framework. So Decree 36, like I said, was an emergency measure introduced in March. Now think of Decree 36 as a stopgap. It was temporary, restrictive, and honestly somewhat confusing. It's very short and didn't give a lot of detail. Decree 36 was something like a page and a half or 3/4 of a page long, depending on the version you looked at. DDL 1450 is 75 pages long, and it seems to be the current government's plan to make the rules official and more predictable and legally enforceable moving forward. And it does make some changes from the decree itself. Is DDL 1450 likely to be the future of Italian citizenship law? It does seem that it is likely. It builds on Decree 36. It's introduced and supported by the same political coalition, essentially the same lawmakers that obviously put a lot of time and effort into making this. When you read it, it aligns with recent court rulings and ministry guidance, and there are no serious competing bills at this point. Most of it is not retroactive unless specifically stated, but there are some elements of retroactivity that are mentioned specifically. The key rules will only apply from the effective date. And exactly how this transition is going to go, we've seen essentially the decree itself sort of strips people of their Italian citizenship by descent that they inherited under the laws at the time they were born. So though this bill says that it's not retroactive, we'll have to see if they unfold it in some sort of way where they actually implement it as being in some way retroactive, changing eligibility for those who would have qualified under the laws in the past at the time that they were born. So we'll have to see how this is actually implemented. The bill has three main parts. It's got the actual draft bill, which is not that long. It's the legalese, it's the actual amendments, but the bulk of the document of the 75 pages is the illustrative report and the technical report. And in those, you get a lot of glimpses into what the lawmakers were thinking, their reasoning behind creating all of this, and what they're trying to do. So when you look at the three altogether, you get a picture of what they're proposing as well as what their intentions are moving forward, which could be really helpful to understand where they're going with this, because there may be some elements that might change over time and as this is implemented. And there are some places where the illustrative report mentions things that the draft bill itself does not mention, and we'll see some of those examples. So here's one of the first items we want to talk about with the new draft bill. Automatic citizenship now has limits. Now you're going to notice this is pretty in line with Decree 36. It's just written from the reverse perspective in this case. No automatic recognition if both parents were born abroad, i.e. outside of Italy. Neither parent lived in Italy for 2 consecutive years before the birth of their child, and grandparents were also born abroad. So this is the same as what we've seen with the decree, which requires you to have a parent or grandparent born in Italy or a parent that lived in Italy for 2 consecutive years before your birth in order for you to be eligible. So no major changes there. Adopted children are going to be given the same treatment. So we could go back and say that the rules would be that you have to have a parent or adoptive parent born in Italy, a parent or adoptive parent who lived in Italy for 2 consecutive years before birth, or grandparents who were born in Italy in order to be eligible. And again, this obviously keeps the 2-generational limit that we've seen with the decree. So that's an important point. But we'll see where there's some shades on that point. Now, great grandchildren. So interestingly, it's not included in the law portion in the actual legalese of the bill. However, this illustrative report that I mentioned does suggest a possible eligibility beyond the second degree or the second generation, which is parents and grandparents. Why would they even bring that up if there was no plan for that ever to be part of this law? So it begs the question, do they have some intention for some provisions that would allow you conditionally to go beyond the second degree, the beyond the grandparent? The two things that it says that would be required to go beyond this second degree is a year of legal residency in Italy and a B1 level of Italian proficiency. So there seems to be an intentional decision to leave a bit of a provisional opportunity for going beyond the second generation here. And that's consistent with what I've heard from attorneys and what I felt personally, that this is an area that there could be some softening as the decree law and the future law, which might be this DDL 1450, moves forward. There might be some softening of positions and some deal making as this law gets converted. And one of the places that could happen would be allowing the third generation back to great grandparents as well. And next up, we'll take a look at minor children. And this is a point that needs to be clarified. So citizenship is only granted under DDL 1450 if the child resides legally in Italy for 2 years or has lived in Italy since birth if they're under the age of 2. Now, to clarify, this is automatic citizenship, automatically being recognized as an Italian citizen. Prior to the decree and to the advent of this bill, a minor children would automatically be recognized along with their parents. When their parents became recognized, that's being stripped, but there is still a provision to allow for minor children to qualify. It's no longer automatic, but they can qualify either through meeting the same eligibility requirements of having a parent born in Italy, lived in Italy for 2 years, or a grandparent. But if they don't meet those requirements, they have this path also of being able to be recognized for Italian citizenship if they either reside legally in Italy for 2 years or have lived in Italy since birth if they're under 2 years of age. So that's something to keep an eye on and see if they make any provisions for going back beyond the second degree. But for now, this is what they've indicated about minor children. 1948 cases, so there's a little bit of a change. It's not a massive change. They haven't gone back and rewritten the law to remove the need completely for 1948 court cases, but they have done so for a specific class of people. So the children of Italian mothers, the child being under 21 on January 1st, 1948, are retroactively recognized, and it appears that they do not need to go through a court case to obtain their recognition. However, if we're talking about this is your grandmother gave birth to your father, who was a minor on January 1st, 1948, he could be retroactively recognized, but that would not apply to you. It appears under DDL 1450, the grandchildren would still need to apply via court recognition. And we include further generations because of this mention in that earlier slide about some possible provision for going beyond that second degree to the third degree. So at this point, the grandchildren where their line involves the minor issue would still, it appears, need to go through the court route to obtain recognition. Next up, we do see stricter documentation rules under DDL 1450. The lawmakers specifically mentioned that certain declarations and witness testimony had been abused in certain situations, certain countries. And so they're eliminating that. They're really limiting it to only official documents, birth, marriage, naturalization records, etc. That's not, in my experience, a huge problem. It's pretty rare that I find people are really challenged to get their documents, but there are some cases where documents were destroyed during a war or a natural disaster or something like that. There are still workarounds there, but it sounds like they are going to have a bit of a tougher position, and it may involve a little bit more work and effort for those that are having trouble finding a particular document. Now, they also talk a bit about, they clarified timelines for recognition. So they've extended the recognition time for those applying for Italian citizenship by descent. Now, this is the timeline for the agencies in Italy to process. They have now 48 months, which is a big extension on what they had previously. And court rulings, this refers to essentially when a court ruling like a 1948 case happens, the judgment is issued and then the documents, the records need to be registered with the comune. The comune now has a 12-month limitation to comply with that, which is good because a lot of people have been stuck in this limbo where they've received a positive judgment. Their 1948 case outcome has been positive, but the comune is taking forever to register the documents and it sort of not getting it done, and they're just stuck in this perpetual limbo. So this helps speed that process up. Now, we also see a loss of citizenship for non-long-term residents. This is kind of a theme, having this effective connection or real ties to Italy. And they talk about how citizens born abroad, those who are born abroad and then become recognized as Italian citizens in some way, could lose their citizenship if they have no real ties to Italy for 25 years and their birth is not registered in Italy by age 25 for those born after the enactment of this bill, should that happen. So it doesn't apply retroactively, but a 25-year clock starts from the day the law takes effect according to this bill. So no one would technically lose their citizenship overnight. And when we talk about what counts as real ties, this is defined as exercising rights or fulfilling duties as a citizen. This is about civic engagement. If you want to keep your Italian citizenship over the long term, you'll need to show that you're connected even if you live abroad. Examples are voting, paying taxes, and other civic obligations. Now, we also see a tightening when it comes to marriage-based citizenship. This is people who are applying for Italian citizenship through marriage. Spouses can now only apply after 2 years of legal residence in Italy. Previously, there was an option that allowed for couples who were married for more than 3 years. There were some other provisions to that, depending on having children together. But essentially, there was a path for those who lived abroad that appears to be removed in DDL 1450. It does not mention this path any longer. And it appears that this requirement of living for 2 years in Italy is going to be required for people to obtain Italian citizenship by marriage, at least as it's currently written and interpreted. Now, here's the big one. This could be a big relief for many applicants when we talk about the minor issue. DDL 1450 does appear to potentially resolve the minor issue. The draft law does not mention or specifically include the October 3rd circular's extra requirements. So if the parent was Italian at birth, that appears to be enough under DDL 1450. It seems they certainly could have added and codified the language of the minor issue circular had they intended to keep that, but they did not. So we'll have to see how this is implemented. But DDL 1450 does not repeat this rule that a parent needed to maintain their Italian citizenship until their child turned 21 before 1975 and 18 from 1975 onward. The recognition appears to only depend on the parent's citizenship at the time of the child's birth, at least as written right now. This is one of those, again, where we're going to have to see how things are implemented to see, there's the mention of this term derogation, which we've seen in previous videos and in interviews with Italian attorneys. There's some debate over exactly how that would work. But in this case, this requirement for the child to reach adulthood is not codified into law. That was really just an interpretation of the law put into effect on October 3rd with that circular. So it's not in the law. It's still not in the law under DDL 1450, and there's no reference to it. So again, it seems like this is something they could have really put into law and codified it if it was something that they really intended to keep. So we're going to stay hopeful about the minor issue. So final takeaways, there could be an easing of some of the restrictions from Decree 36, could open some new paths for those going beyond the second generation or those blocked by things such as the minor issue. But there's also some things that are actually getting a little bit stricter, like the applying for Italian citizenship through marriage. Overall, the bill prioritizes integration, residency, this effective connection, recent ties over the distant ancestry that the previous laws did acknowledge and take into consideration. So we're still in the same situation, constitutionally. The decree, as well as DDL 1450, does seem to have the intention to strip people of Italian citizenship by descent, which many people received automatically based on the laws that were in effect at the time of their birth. So again, this is a fluid situation. We've got a lot more information to come, but the general consensus has been Italian attorneys and experts seem to agree that being prepared to move quickly if and when one of these windows opens for you is going to help you be the most successful in your efforts to have your Italian citizenship recognized. So gathering and preparing documents is the best way to make sure you're ready. As I mentioned previously, you don't need to jump into hiring an attorney or an expensive agency because this all does not need to cost a fortune. So if you're ready to take action, these are some ways that you can do that moving forward. And you can certainly get your case reviewed and help you understand where you stand against all of these swirling eligibility requirements and what your best path forward is. And if you have questions, you need help, or you want to learn more about if you qualify, we do offer very affordable 20, 30, and 60-minute consultations at italiandual.com. And I will keep you updated as changes to this come in, and we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.